joined by top Bilderberg correspondent Dan Dix of Press for Truth at the conclusion of the 2018 Bilderberg Conference in Turin, Italy. Behind the camera, this is Josh Friedman. Dan, how you doing this evening, and how you doing at the end of the 2018 Bilderberg Conference?
Tired, exhausted. It's been a long run. It feels like it's been a couple of weeks, even though it was only 3 days. You know, that's what happens when they run you around and detain you, 5 or 6 times in the period of about 48 hours. Gets kind of exhausting sometimes. So, yeah, I'm a little tired, but I think it was a successful Bilderberg. We got a number of interesting conversations, a couple of confrontation type interviews, and a lot of great footage.
And it wasn't so easy this year to get the footage and to get the interviews and to have any interaction with the participants.
Yeah, they were kind of a little more quiet than normal. I mean, usually we can engage with them quite a bit. They'll at least talk to us. This time they were not even saying no comment. Some of them, they would just not even open up their mouths. I don't know if this was instructed of them, or if they're just starting to switch up their strategy and not give us a single peep. But it was a lot harder to get a soundbite out of any of them.
In terms of contemporary journalists covering Bilderberg, you're now very much a senior correspondent. You've been covering the conference since when exactly?
My first one was in 2006, so 12 years ago now.
And that you've been every year since?
No, I haven't been every year. I've gone on and off. I've been every year since 2012, that's for sure. I haven't missed one since 2012, so done 2012 to 2018 consecutively. And the first one was 12 years ago.
I'm interested in asking you how your view of the Bilderberg Group and the Bilderberg Conference has changed or possibly matured over the years as you've racked up a lot of insights as well as interactions with members.
Well, that's twofold. So the conference itself, the exposure of the conference has changed in the sense that back in 2006 there were only 4 journalists. It was myself, Daniel Estelon, Jim Tucker, and Alex Jones, and that was it. And maybe about 5 to 8 protesters at the max. Over those years, I've seen that double, triple, quadruple, exponentially grow to the point where we had a few, like in Watford, England a few years ago, there was thousands of people showing up, protesters, and at least a few dozen independent media. Same thing happened in Chantilly, Virginia. There were dozens of independent media and maybe 1,000 protesters who showed up. So that's nice to see that momentum, that exponential growth. But
well, has that momentum kept going? Because it seems like the past couple years there haven't been so many journalists and protesters.
It depends on the country, I find. Here in Italy, it was quite disappointing. There was hardly any protesters or any kind of protest set up, as far as I knew of, that brought out any kind of locals to protest this thing. And the amount of journalists here was really slim to none as well, but maybe that's just typical of Italy. I'm not sure. I noticed something similar in Copenhagen, Denmark. I was expecting a lot more independent media to come out to that one, but to my surprise, there really wasn't that many. So it's tough to say. I think the progression is going to continue with that momentum, especially if we see it in North America. So if it's held in America or maybe even Canada next year, we could see a pretty big turnout.
And what about your views on the group, having covered the Bilderberg Group and the conference for about a dozen years now?
Yeah, well, in the beginning, I thought about it like most people do, kind of on the more conspiratorial side of things, that it's this grand a conspiracy of people who are trying to build a new world order, a one world government. And although that is true, my understanding of it has evolved in the sense that now I understand that there is truly an inner circle within the inner circle. Maybe even an inner circle within that inner circle in the inner circle, like the Russian dolls thing. It seems that, you have to be invited to Bilderberg, first of all. So when you got 120 to 150 people, the only way this could properly work is through compartmentalization, where not everybody who goes is involved in anything necessarily nefarious or aware of the agenda for a one world government or a new world order, or has to be aware or involved in this in any way, shape, or form. But they can still be influenced and used as pawns in certain circumstances. Kind of like with, Edward Bernays, who wrote Propaganda back in 1928, spoke about how the ideas and the opinions of the masses can be shaped and molded by just a few people. And that's how I see Bilderberg today. Is they invite people of influence, people who will take these ideas and spread them throughout society, not necessarily aware of any kind of endgame agenda, but just influential people who can carry out the inner clique's message. And I found examples of this. In 2002, for example, the meeting, there were some documents that were leaked, and we found out that in 2002, the Bilderberg Group was talking about Saddam Hussein and how he's a problem, and he's got weapons of mass destruction, and these sorts of things. And when you look at who was in the meeting that year, it was guys like, Donald Rumsfeld and all these war hawk guys. And then all of a sudden, after that meeting, it started making its way into the mainstream media. It started making that concept made its way throughout society, and sure enough, 1 year later, they invaded Iraq. So I began to see how the ideas that they plant in people's heads could be used and can then spread. Another example quickly is, the formation of an eventual North American Union, because they openly talk about the formation of the European Union, the coming together of all those countries under one umbrella. Well, in Canada, you have Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin, Stephen Harper. All these prime ministers of Canada attended Bilderberg. Now, Jean Chrétien signed in NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. Paul Martin was involved with the signing of the SPP, the Security and Prosperity Partnership. Stephen Harper is involved with the North American Leaders Summit. So they don't individually have to be aware that there's an agenda for a North American Union, but I feel that, Bilderberg influenced them to do these things separately. And Chrétien doesn't have to be aware of Paul Martin's plan and vice versa. It's compartmentalization. So that's how I see it now. It's a top-down system, pyramidal structure, knowledge at the top, less and less knowledge of the agenda as you go down. And so, as I said, it's a very small inner clique who actually know the true agenda of the group.
And how do we know what the agenda is of this inner clique?
Well, when you've been studying it for as long as I have, you know that the overarching endgame, if you will, is an eventual one world government. And it's not just the Bilderberg Group. This essentially is a plan that dates back centuries. And this is just another mechanism, another vehicle to try to usher that in. And when you look at the stated goals of a lot of these guys, I mean, look at what they're proud of. Look at some of the things they've already achieved in the past, and that's a good way to understand what they want to do in the future. Like uniting the countries of Europe into a union. So you gotta understand what they've done in the past to be able to have a better understanding of what they want to do in the future. And that's by seeing some of the things they've already done, some of the things they talk about, some of the things they're involved in. It leads me to believe that their agenda is to eventually join everything together into one. And I think order out of chaos seems to be their modus operandi, where they want to make the pain and suffering of separation far out exceed any kind of problems people may have with giving up their national sovereignty. So through causing certain strife right now, immigration is a hot issue in Europe. The eventual endgame solution, I think, will be to open up the borders. Hey, can't we all just get along? Enough is enough. Look how many bad things are happening. We need to get along. Order out of chaos. Open it up to a one world government eventually is what I think the agenda is.
It certainly, it certainly seems that core Bilderberg members support these supranational bodies, these supranational governments and organizations. But do you have any insights into why they would support a world government? I mean, trying to take into consideration, for instance, who these people are. We have financiers, big bankers, some of whom have histories at high levels of government. Some of them are an industry, others are media moguls. So why would these people rally behind an agenda for a world government?
Well, I don't think that they think that they're doing something evil or bad or wrong. I think that they think that this is for the betterment of humanity, and that they're going to make the world a better place. But just because they think that, it doesn't necessarily make it so. I mean, Hitler's a good example, not to always jump to that, but he thought he was doing a good thing. He believed in the cause, and he thought that by doing what he did, it was gonna eventually down the road make the world a better place. He truly believed that, and I think they're the same. They think that this is what the world needs. They know better. They have a divine right to rule over us, and they know better than us, and therefore they think that what we all need in order to have a prosperous future for all is to eventually erase all the borders and join under their rule, under their control. So I think they're delusional in thinking that it's going to make the world a better place, when really this is something that was warned about in the Bible. I mean, look at the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. There was a time when the whole world was united into one. And God said, no, I want you to be individuals. And he separated the nations, and he confused the languages. And ever since that time, I think they've been trying to get it back together again to that point that they had it back in the time of the Tower of Babel, thinking that this is what people need. But it's the opposite. According to God's word, it's going to destroy the whole world unless he comes back to save it, which is what this is all going to eventually come down to.
On that note, any predictions or expectations? I'm not going to say prophecy, but do you have any idea about the direction that the Bilderberg agenda is going to take in the future?
Well, I hate to say it, but I think things are going to get a lot worse before they get any better, because right now there's a shift happening. There's a passing of the torch, if you will. A lot of these guys are really old. Henry Kissinger, really old. A lot of these Rothschild representatives, really old, People like, Rockefeller just died. George Soros is incredibly old. The Queen is really old. All of these people are about to die soon. And there's a new generation who's going to take the torch and going to be the new leaders in this power structure. And they haven't experienced wars like their fathers have. They haven't gone through the First and Second World War. So they are power hungry and ready and waiting for their turn and their time to shine. And so that's kind of scary to me, because as I said, they haven't experienced the horrors of these types of things, and it seems that they are just gung-ho to hurry up and take the reins of power so it's their time to shine. So I think in the next 10 years, when a lot of these older leaders die off and their sons and the people they've shaped and molded and groomed become the new leaders, they're going to be power hungry and ready to just go for it. So I think things are going to get a lot worse before they get better, but that's why we need to exponentially continue what we're doing. Spread awareness, tell people what's happening, let them know this is what's coming down the road, and hopefully we can get enough people to wake up to this before it gets completely out of hand.
We shall see how this unfolds. What can we expect from your coverage in the future of Bilderberg and in general from Press for Truth?
Yeah, I take it day by day. I mean, when I go home, it depends on what's happening in the news, what I want to, cover on any given day. I mean, I usually try to put out about 5 to 6 videos a week. So I don't think ahead of it too much. I've got some documentary ideas that I'm working on. There's the legalization of cannabis coming down the road in Canada. I've been tracking that, following it for a few years now, so I have a lot to say about that. So I may put out a documentary about that, but other than that, I take it day by day. I got a few speaking events coming up. I'm going to an event in a week or two in Spokane, Washington, a conference to interview some great speakers and do some networking. I'll be joining you in Bulgaria in 3 weeks from now, I believe, for another speaking event. So yeah, I'm just taking it day by day.
Well, on that note, I guess I'll be seeing you pretty soon. I believe it's even fewer than 3 weeks from now.
Oh boy.
So you've got a busy schedule ahead of you. You're not going to be hanging around touring too long. I'll let you do some globe trotting, and I guess I'll be running into you before too long.
All right.
Best of luck on your journeys in the coming weeks, and I will be seeing you shortly, I guess.
Thank you. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Dan.